In the dark recesses of history lie surprising and disturbing tales. One of the most intriguing is the use of drugs by Adolf Hitler during the Second World War. Behind these events stands the Führer's personal physician, Theodor Morell, whose name is closely linked to supplying psychoactive substances to Hitler and the Nazi militias. But the story goes beyond mere stimulants. We're talking about entering a world of excess, addictions, and desperate decisions amidst the chaos of war. We will explore the impact of drugs in the Führer's universe to uncover how pharmaceuticals influenced the actions of the German government in the Second World War. Get ready for a fascinating and unsettling journey through the deepest secrets of the Third Reich. Theodor Morell became a key figure in Adolf Hitler's life during the last years of the Nazi regime. Their controversial relationship, marked by the Führer's dependence on the treatments of this contentious doctor, has sparked endless questions and debates among historians. The physician entered Hitler's inner circle in 1936, quickly earning the dictator's trust thanks to his apparent success in alleviating his physical ailments, particularly his digestive issues. He employed a wide range of substances, from vitamins and hormones to animal extracts and experimental medications, generating controversies among the leader's closest associates. Morell's influence over Hitler grew over time, to the extent that he was considered a wizard by the Führer. This bond was reinforced by the flattery and servility Morell showed towards Hitler, whom he considered an infallible genius. Let's listen to a historian talking about this dark character and what a typical medical routine to which Adolf Hitler himself was subjected.
He gave him injections of glucose because he felt that Hitler needed strengthening, he needed building up a bit. Hitler was a vegetarian who had a fairly miserable diet. We have the menus that were made up for him for Christmas Day, for example, which are just terrible.
The specific details of the treatments and drugs administered by the doctor have been the subject of debate and speculation for decades, fueling conspiracy theories and questioning the health status and behavior of the Führer. The relationship between Morell and Hitler raises intriguing questions about the physician's influence on the decisions of the totalitarian leader and his overall health. Was he a dedicated healer seeking to alleviate his patient's suffering, or an opportunist who leveraged his position to gain favor with the most powerful man of the time? In the last months of 1944, Morell's power reached new proportions. After the failed assassination attempt he had suffered, Hitler clung more than ever to his doctor, whose influence was magnified with every dose of medication he administered. The dictator always wanted to have the healthcare professional available at the Wolf's Lair, as the Nazi headquarters was called, as he trusted him like no other. He found in the doctor a confidant and companion in the darkest moments, as he seemed to understand like no one else the physical afflictions that plagued him. While the shadow of the danger of a new assassination attempt lurked in every corner, an SS guard watched over each entrant as if they were a potential assassin. However, the doctor's briefcase and his person were an exception. They passed freely without being examined, a gesture of the unbreakable trust Hitler had in him. The enviable position of the self-proclaimed sole doctor generated jealousy and suspicion within Hitler's circle. Morell's reluctance to share his healing methods fueled rumors and intrigue, enveloping him in an aura of mystery and power. Even figures like Martin Bormann, Hitler's personal secretary, stumbled upon his refusal to modify and share details of the leader's treatment. But with the decline of the war and the potential Nazi defeat, scapegoat seekers began to emerge. The doctor's opponents organized themselves, with Himmler at the forefront, accumulating evidence not only of the strange medications he administered to the Chancellor, but also accusing him of morphine addiction and other scientific crimes. Amidst chaos and uncertainty, the doctor struggled to maintain his position and reputation against the looming rumors. Outlandish theories about his true identity emerged, fueling conspiracies and fear in all sectors of the Reich. The imminent defeat often triggers paranoid behaviors. Despite his impeccable suits and silk shirts trying to disguise it, Theodor Morell couldn't escape the stigma of his nicknames. The greasy one, the stinky one, the malodorous one. He was an obese and unpleasant man who was far from the figure of the Aryan Superman that the Reich sought to impose. Let's listen to a professional talking about how this controversial doctor was perceived by Hitler's entourage.
Dr. Morell was a rather unpleasant person, at least most people in Hitler's entourage found him unpleasant. He was overweight, he was a bit of a slob, he was a noisy, messy eater, he was something of a glutton who shoved food down himself. He had a rather strong and unpleasant body odour. But Hitler, when he was faced with criticisms of Dr. Morell of this kind, said, "I don't employ Dr. Morell for his fragrance, I employ him to look after my health."
Despite the whispers and disdainful looks, the Führer chose him as his personal physician, and no criticism or revulsion could move him from that privileged position. For that reason, every ailment of Hitler was attended to by Morell with unparalleled dedication. Every morning, like a modern-day alchemist, he prepared a mysterious potion that promised to cure all the ailments of the Nazi leader. Vitamins, minerals, enzymes, testosterone, and even bull semen for his nights with Eva Braun, all mixed into a supposedly miraculous injection. But among the secret ingredients, the true elixir of happiness for Hitler was hidden: cocaine. Before delving into the Führer's use of drugs, we will tell you the conclusion of this complex character. Morell stayed with his patient until the end. He accompanied him in the bunker where the last breaths of the Second World War were witnessed. With the roar of the Red Army's weapons resonating around him, the doctor, who by that time was already dubbed the Needle Chancellor or the Injector Minister, dared to ask Hitler for permission to flee. Miraculously, he succeeded. On April 22, 1945, he boarded one of the last planes leaving Berlin, escaping the tragic consequences. However, his fate was not to be so fortunate. Captured by an American patrol, he spent several months in a prisoner of war camp before being released. Surprisingly, he was never accused of any crime, and his life followed a path marked by decline. He died at the age of 61, obese and addicted to morphine, a victim of a stroke. In the midst of the chaos and desperation of war, Hitler sought refuge in the warm embrace provided by drugs. Any substance that promised an escape from harsh reality was welcome in his world. Soon, cocaine became his constant companion, providing temporary relief from his sorrows. Obviously, it was always provided by his sycophantic doctor to administer the doses. However, the Führer was not a slave to a single drug and sought new sensations and emotions, switching from stimulant to stimulant, always pursuing something more. A historian specializing in this particular topic describes how the Führer's diagnosis was and reveals an impressive detail of his psychological evaluation.
He was either severely depressed or overly optimistic, completely unrealistic about the reality of the war. And I think that constant back and forth of his mania and depression throughout the last few years of the war was an effect of the interaction of the amphetamines and the bipolar disorder.
He kept a personal diary in which he narrated his narcotic episodes. The words resonated with a sense of grandeur and egotism, clearly the result of the stimulating effects of drugs. Let's listen to a passage from the Chancellor himself. The weeks that followed July 20th were a true hell. It was a heroic feat that no one, not even a German, could conceive. Despite immense pain, endless dizziness, and profound anguish, I remained steadfast and fought with indomitable energy. The danger of defeat was always present, but I clung to my will with unwavering determination. Without directly alluding to cocaine, it was clear that he believed it gave him superhuman abilities. It was during the dark October of 1944 when Hitler decided to leave the controversial substance behind and venture into new chemical horizons. Despite the risks and warnings from his closest lieutenants, he boldly plunged into the unknown, thirsty for different experiences. Beyond the facade of power and dominance, the Führer believed that immersing himself in a turbulent world of addiction and despair aided his leadership skills. His days were driven by an explosive combination of cocaine and Eucadol, a potent drug that had become his loyal ally. The power of cocaine and the high amount of Eucadol, as noted by Morell in his records, mingled in his bloodstream and unleashed a frenzy of uncontrollable emotions. Each dose was like a whirlwind, a roller coaster of sensations that dragged him into a state of euphoria and exhilaration. It was a fierce battle between two opposing forces, where the sedation of Eucadol clashed against the vehement energy of cocaine. His body became a battlefield, with his circulatory system struggling under the burden of these powerful substances. Nights turned into a dance with insomnia, while his liver desperately fought against the onslaught of toxins. Amidst this whirlwind of feelings and substances, Hitler became trapped in a dark and chaotic world, where the line between reality and fantasy blurred. It was a constant struggle to maintain control. This dispute brought him to the edge of the abyss and plunged him into the darkest depths of his own mind. In the final moments of the war and of his individual existence, the dictator almost willingly surrendered to the artificial paradises that the drug constructed in his psyche. He believed he could see with absolute clarity while weaving a world tailored to his ecstasy as Führer. For the generals, already disillusioned by the discouraging situation on the front, following his absurd current became an impossible task. The medication provided by Morell kept the supreme leader firmly entrenched in his madness, erecting an insurmountable wall, an invulnerable armor that nothing and no one could penetrate. Any hint of doubt in a war strategy was dispelled by artificially induced confidence. Even as the world crumbled around him and his actions claimed the lives of millions of people, the Führer felt fully justified in his deeds when a substance entered his veins and artificial euphoria seized him.
The substances administered to Adolf Hitler included commercial poisons, as well as psychoactive drugs such as heroin, cocaine, adrenaline via eye drops, and methamphetamine, which since 1938 was marketed on a large scale in Germany as a non-prescription drug under the brand name Pervitin.
The relationship between Hitler and substances is a dark and controversial chapter in history. Although clinical dependency on drugs cannot be proven for the Führer, Morell's cryptic diary from September 1944 suggests frequent use of hard drugs. It is possible that Eucadol entered the dictator's circulatory system in various ways beyond traditional forms of administration. The doctor's notes reveal that he administered a total of 800 injections to the Führer over a period of 1,349 days, which is an alarming measure. In September 1944, the Chancellor received doses of the potent drug up to 4 times in 1 week, with barely a day's break between each dose. This rhythm, more akin to that of an addict, contradicts the version of purely therapeutic application. What did the Supreme Leader feel after each injection of that powerful substance? What actions did the intoxicating sensation that coursed through his body trigger in Hitler, as he savored the initial effects through his palate, like a divine elixir flooding his being? We can only speculate. Perhaps he experienced a sensation comparable to that of a mythical hero after conquering the beast, obtaining the most precious treasures, and reaching the heights of power. Energy surged through him, filling him with vigor and confidence within seconds, like a torrent of ecstasy enveloping him completely. And when, with a smile on his lips, he said to Morell, "I'll be glad to see you in the morning, Doctor." His words resonated with unparalleled authenticity. The dictator knew that a new dose of that magical syringe awaited him at dawn, ready to transport him once again to a state of greatness and power that reality could never match. However, he was not the only Nazi using drugs. Despite being frowned upon for recreational use, narcotics produced by German pharmaceutical companies played a key role for Nazi militias. On the battlefields of the Second World War, German soldiers had an unusual ally. We're talking about Pervitin, a drug created by Third Reich scientists that became a secret weapon to keep troops alert and energetic for long periods of time. But what was this substance really? Let's hear from one of the specialists on the subject, historian Norman Ohler, author of the book Blitzed Drugs in the Third Reich.
So it was very interesting for me to examine how a dictatorship like the Nazi regime was using drugs, was instrumentalizing drugs for its own good, to control people, to boost its army.
Pervitin was an early form of methamphetamine, originally designed as a medication for the treatment of narcolepsy, asthma, and depression. However, the leaders of Nazism saw a much darker potential in this powerful substance and introduced it into the German army during the war. Its use was intended to keep soldiers awake and alert during full days of combat, especially in critical moments such as nighttime offensives or rapid advances. It is even said that the success of the Luftwaffe's lightning attacks, known as Blitzkrieg, was mainly due to the fact that troops were altered with this drug. The effects of Pervitin were immediate and powerful. It increased energy, reduced the need for sleep, and improved concentration and mood. The soldiers who consumed the medication became more aggressive and confident, allowing them to face combat situations with greater determination. However, there were also concerning side effects, such as loss of appetite, dehydration, anxiety, and paranoia. These unintended symptoms were catastrophic for the Nazi armed forces, who had to deal with weakened soldiers who, due to their altered senses, would threaten and even kill comrades or superiors in psychotic episodes. Despite these risks, Pervitin became a widely used tool in the German army, especially in moments of crisis and extreme fatigue. Its impact on the course of the war and on the mental health of soldiers was profound and lasting, leaving a dark legacy in Germany's military history.
Some soldiers turned violent, committing war crimes against civilians. Others even attacked their own officers. By 1941, usage was restricted to a doctor's prescription, and the military tightly controlled its distribution. Soldiers would only receive a couple of tablets at a time, and were discouraged from using them in combat.
In summary, the link between Hitler and drugs, through his personal physician Dr. Morell, is a disturbing section of Third Reich history. The Nazi leader's dependence on a variety of psychoactive substances, such as eucodol and cocaine, sheds light on his mental state and decisions during the final years of World War II. The widespread use of drugs in Nazi militias, especially Pervitin, is also a disturbing aspect of this period. This secret chapter reminds us of the complexity of the factors influencing historical events and how individual decisions, as well as institutional policies and practices, can be altered by the use of brain-altering medicines. Furthermore, it serves as a warning about the dangers of drug abuse and the importance of vigilance against their misuse in any context, whether in times of war or in everyday life. It's impossible not to wonder if Hitler would have been equally tyrannical if he hadn't used these drugs. After this video, the answer may be a bit clearer. We're reaching the end of this tragic installment, but before we conclude, we wanted to ask you, do you believe that Hitler's drug abuse affected his judgment during the course of the war? What do you think would have happened if he hadn't been under the influence of narcotics during the most crucial moments of the conflict? We look forward to reading your valuable comments and appreciate your participation. Thank you for staying until the end, and we'll see you in the next episodes of Military History.